Okay, so this is the first part of Module 8. We're going to go through a quick review of the topics. This is the Rogers piece, so we're talking about variables determining the rate of adoption of innovation. We've gone through a bunch of these things. So perceived attributes of innovation, so relative advantage, complexity, or rather compatibility, complexity, trialability, observability. And then, as we kind of go forward there, we introduce kind of other things, especially with things like the R curve, the speed at which things can occur, types of innovation decisions. So we've got optional. This was the example where a hospital adopts some sort of new procedure, new technology, and then doctors are able to adopt it as well. Collective authority or collective innovation decisions where we kind of as a consensus we come together and decide, yes, we're going to move forward with this. And then authority decisions, someone at the top or a few people at the top make the decision and everybody's got to get on board. Different types of communication channels. So we've talked a lot about this because we are now seeing in more recent times that it's changing the shape of the curve of innovation. So we're looking not only just at mass media, but at social media and the new types of communication available that provide a very, person-to-person word of mouth on a mass scale that are creating that convex or R curve. And then the more normal S curve created by interpersonal communication, one-to-one stories and information that relay the relative advantage and such about the innovation. The nature of the social system, so we've talked a little bit about this, more so in the case studies, and then the extent of change agent effort. So those things are to come. We have, kind of talked about it a little bit, but that, of course, all affects the rate of adoption of innovations and also the shape of that curve. So subjective evaluations of an innovation derive from individual and group experiences and perceptions and conveyed by interpersonal networks drive the innovation or the diffusion process. So the themes of what that innovation is all about. So the meanings of innovation, as we know, are in the people. So we've talked a lot about how the diffusion happens and the importance of the culture and how it is supported. That piece of relative advantage and complexity and compatibility are all very culturally dependent. And so what might happen quickly in one country or in one culture, or even in, especially with respect to the piece that we read for Module 8, even in one part of the country are different than, what may happen in other parts of the country because the culture and the situation is different. So this is another review. This is more of the Utterback. So we're looking at the interaction or the cross point between process innovation and product innovation. So where they intersect, that's the word I was looking for. So right at the end of the fluid phase where the dominant design is decided, we switch over from product innovation that starts to swoop down and process innovation starts to tick up. And the reason for that is we've gotten to the dominant design. The people that have, represented that dominant design are now going into the competitive state where they will compete against one another, and the trick is going to be to do it efficiently. So we're moving through the transitional phase where we start to lock in those rigid processes and we start to actually make money. And as that process innovation slopes down again and decreases, we're in that specific phase where we have a profit formula, Christensen's, work, where we really have very little opportunity for change at this point. We are making money. We've got very rigid processes. We're getting innovation from, potentially from outside the company, but certainly not from within the organization at this point because all those things are going to influence that profit formula and potentially drive profits down. So That is really, more that Utterback piece of it. So, and then switch, we've gone through direct the rider, motivate the elephant, and the next section that we'll talk about next is shape the path. So culture is learned help, so habits, expectations, language, and perspective. So all these things come together to influence the rate of diffusion of innovation, to influence the rate of change within an organization. All things, are important and need to be considered when you're talking about diffusing an innovation. Communication, both verbal, nonverbal, and contextual. This is a great, picture even for our case study for this section, where you have culture A decoding different messages about an innovation, and culture B decoding and the codes and the messages for the innovation, and they're going to be looking at things very differently, and what one views as an advantage the other may not. So we've got to take all that into consideration, especially when we go through a global diffusion, even a diffusion within the same company, that might be going across different cultures, maybe just different geographies. We can't underestimate the impact of all of those, different aspects of the culture. So again, attributes of innovation, the relative advantage is the degree to which an innovation is perceived as better than the idea it supersedes. One, very, very important advantage, and I've seen, from a technology perspective, in the technology world, that the other things are important and and significant, but this is the biggest one. If you're not going to make somebody's life easier, if they're not going to make more money, if whatever it is, everything kind of goes out the window. Compatibility, the degree to which an innovation is perceived as being consistent with existing values, past experience, and needs of potential adopters. Yes, this is great if it's there, but oftentimes, and especially in disruptive technology, it is not there. And sometimes it just doesn't matter. That rate of change, things like the iPhone, this was something we had never seen before, and it took off like a rocket. A lot of times these days with technology, compatibility is not necessarily something that people are, looking for. When you're talking about different types of innovation, like the Vietnamese moms and feeding the children, the Peruvian water boiling, those are things that are a little bit different from an innovation perspective. They did push against established norms within the culture, within the society, and so that was an issue. But sometimes, when you're looking more at, like I said, technology, this is not necessarily something that's going to impact it. Complexity, for sure, the degree to which an innovation is perceived as difficult to understand and to use, this is an important one, because when you're talking about training, when you're talking about end users, it's not over until, that diffusion is accepted and normalized within the organization. So from an authority perspective, you can push it out, you can force people to use it, but until they're able to, get on board and accept it and internalize it, it's not done. So complexity is an important thing, and training is going to be important in helping people understand how to use an innovation. Trialability, this is a great one if you've got it, because it really helps people to be able to see how to use something. This is something that, from a technology perspective, we've had different levels of trialability. Giving people a license of something that they could use it, load it, try it out. But today, with things like cloud computing and software as a service, you've got that multi-tenant architecture that literally allows someone to log in the same day and start loading data. So we're not downloading software, we're not investing in hardware, we're simply, loading up data and trying it out. So that gives this type of technology and software a gigantic advantage in the marketplace, the ability to truly see how something's going to work. And then observability, the degree to which the results of an innovation are visible to others. So here we have like our reference work. How do we get customers to stand up and talk about the difference between what their company was like before and after? Can we see that our neighbors have adopted some new type of technology, and we can see that they are spending more time, you know, laying in the sun as opposed to cutting the grass or whatever it is. The ability to see the innovation impacting others is very powerful and helps with that whole herd mentality that we'll talk about in this same module. So that's it for the review, and we'll get to the next part of Module 8.